What are the best songs from Psalm 12? I'm Daniel Mount, joined today by my co-host, Pastor Chad Berry, and we'll answer that question on today's episode of the Expository Songs podcast. We've each picked 5 songs, and we haven't compared notes. Pastor Chad, what is your number 5 song?
At number 5, I put Psalm 12 by The Corner Room. It sticks pretty close to the text. The melody is fairly simple, but it's really pretty. And it would fit really easily into any context. An acoustic context even would work well. So simple, straightforward, easy to sing. And so I had to give it a spot on the top 5.
Now, I had the connection cut out for a second there, although thankfully it's recording in the background, and that'll fix for what everybody hears. But did you say The Corner Room?
Yes.
Cool. That is one of the 2 runners-up I'd picked. So that was, if you will, one of my top 7. At number 5, I have Jehovah Help the Godly Cease, also known as Assurance for Evil Days. It's an anonymous lyric, and the melody's by William Kirkpatrick. We primarily know William Kirkpatrick because he wrote the melodies to some of Fanny Crosby's greatest hymns, including Redeemed and He Hideth My Soul, and he also wrote the melodies to 'Tis So Sweet and Jesus Saves. This is a melody he wrote in 1901. The paraphrase, as far as I can tell, is anonymous. I couldn't find any credited author, and it's just a good, solid paraphrase of the psalm with a good, solid melody.
At number 4, I had Help Lord by Crowning Covenant. Crowning Covenant, I think, has had a representation on all of my top 5 from the Psalms. And the main reason for that is because all of their stuff is fairly singable and straightforward. It all sings very hymn-like. And their recordings, I think, would be a really easy way for any congregation to begin singing the Psalms.
Neat, good pick. I have a rather unknown artist, as far as I can tell, at my number 4 spot, and that's Purest Silver, Psalm 12 by Peter Nevland. I couldn't find much context on Peter Nevland. I did some searching. He doesn't seem to have any website, any social media channels for his music, and his YouTube music channel where I found this has 4 subscribers. But this song is a classic example of why we shouldn't dismiss a song just because it's not as popular as Hillsong or Elevation Worship. It's a good song, real solid treatment of the psalm. And the chorus comes from Psalm 12:6. The words of the Lord are pure words, like silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. The verses are thematic, but they contrast our voice with God's. So despite the fact that I couldn't find anything on them, I thought it was a solid song.
So I had that as my first runner-up.
Oh, neat.
And next to the title of the song, I put in the notes, everyone needs to go subscribe to his channel, because it really is a great song. And you're exactly right. It's a great example of, you don't have to be, a chart topper and have all the YouTube subscribers to be able to create really good music.
It wouldn't take, all of the people who listen to this for us to, 10 times the subscriber count. We should at least do that for. It's a good song.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're at number 3, I believe, right?
Number 3, yeah. And I have Help, O Lord, I believe written by Jill Mcfadden. I don't know that she was actually the one who performed it in the recording. It's another one. Melody's pretty simple. It's led on guitar. And this one also could fit into any context. You could sing it on a Sunday morning for corporate worship. You could sing it sitting around a campfire with a guitar with a group of men on a Saturday night. It's really simple, but really, really beautiful. And I thought it was a really good treatment of Psalm 12.
Neat. I'm pulling a lot from the hymnal in my my list today. I have at my number 3, O Lord, Look Down from Heaven Behold by Martin Luther. He wasn't trying to write a paraphrase in the style of a Crowning Covenant where they're trying to stick as close as possible. He wasn't trying to stick as close to the wording of the psalm as a translated language would allow. It's not a paraphrase, but it is an expository song. The psalm is the main idea of the song, and every verse is tied into the main theme. And I think that this is the best hymn based out of this psalm. I have 2 modern songs as my top 2. In the show notes, I'm linking to the melody that appears in the 1941 Lutheran hymnal, abbreviated in Lutheran circles as TLH. It's a pretty melody. It's a minor key melody, and my apologies, I'm going to dive just a little bit into music theory here. It's a minor key melody that makes thoughtful use of both the relative major and the parallel major chords. So to explain the terms, say you're in D minor. The relative major is F. They're both 1 flat. You're in D minor, the parallel major is D. Same root note, but, different middle. So it's using both the relative and the parallel major chords, which is unusual and kind of cool. Now, spoiler alert, this won't be the last time I mention this song today. Pastor Chad, what do you have as your number 2?
At number 2, and actually this song was originally further down my list, but as I re-listened to things, I needed to push it higher, is Save Jehovah, Psalm 12, by Randy Gordon. Vocally, Randy Gordon would be very similar stylistically to like a Nathan Clark George, or even similar kind of to like a Michael Jonkis, for anybody who may be familiar with those guys and maybe not familiar with Randy Gordon. I don't think that this song was quite as metrical as a modern hymn, but it sings a lot like a modern hymn. Like this very easily could have been something that I think could have been written by Sovereign Grace, for example. It's super singable. One of my favorite things about it, listening to it, it's led, the arrangement that I listened to is led on piano, and it builds and softens in a lot of really key places. So the musicality of this song, I think, really communicates well what's going on in Psalm 12. And the lyrics are really great as well.
Neat. My number 2 is Psalm 12, or the Promises of the Lord, by Karl Kohlhase, and I'll spell that out for the audio listeners. Kohlhase. He's a singer-songwriter from Minnesota who's appeared in a number of my top 5 lists. I picked one of his songs as a top 5 for Psalm 7 and had a number of other guest picks or runners-up in several other episodes. Speaking of Michael Jonkis, I would describe Karl Kohlhase's songs as modern liturgical, and by that I mean they would feel at home in a Lutheran or Catholic service because they're in a liturgical style like Michael Jonkis or Dan Schutt, or more recently Francesca La Rosa. Like modern praise music, they're in a verse-chorus structure, but they have a liturgical feel. And I don't have quite the right words to describe what that liturgical feel is. It's almost you have to hear it and you know it, but it is within that style. But that said, this one has a really strong chorus melody, and it treats the themes of the psalm well. And it's also just a strong enough verse chorus. I think you could work perfectly fine in a non-liturgical context also. But in a liturgical context, this is quite probably your leading pick for singing this song.
That one was also another one of my runners-up.
Neat. So
I think that brings...
Go on.
I think that brings me to number 1, right?
I think it does.
I'll be curious to see if we crossed over on this one. The Words of the Lord by My Soul Among the Lions. And I kept coming back to it. And the main reason why I put it at number 1, I do think it would probably work in most corporate settings. It's very bluegrass, as most of their music is. I shouldn't say most, as a lot of their music is. What stuck out to me about this song is the way that the refrain that they kept coming back to and that they open with is the words of the Lord are pure words. And in a moment of hurt and harm, that's what I think we need to remember as believers, is that the words of the Lord are pure. And I confess, I really like the line where they say, I don't care much for your words. You speak and I get nervous. The words of the Lord are pure words. I keep them in my mind. And that's really what we need to do. It's always good to read widely and listen to the words of others, but ultimately the weight of those words is measured by their connection with the scriptures. And this is one you just, as you listen to it, you can't help but feel the rhythm of the music and bob along with it.
You're right. This is my number one pick also. And it is really catchy. It's catchier than most psalm settings are. And you've covered a number of the points I could have said, so I'll try to limit my remarks to a few things you might not have already said. I do think this song would work well in a church that sings modern hymns and hymns, and especially a younger church. Because the lyrics of the chorus, because of the bluegrassiness, are a little bit on the casual side. And so the more liturgical a church is, or high church, or to some extent the older and more formal a congregation might be, it may be just a little casual. I don't think anybody would be mad or object to it, but it would definitely push the edges of what a formal or traditional congregation would be used to. Where a younger congregation would just love it straight up. Yeah. I think for an older congregation, it might take some getting used to, but I do think once they got used to it, everybody would love it because it's a catchy song. It expresses the themes well, and you just can't help but like it.
Yeah. As I was talking about it, I was tempted to try to start singing it, which nobody wants to hear that. And plus, I don't know how that would do with copyright issues as well.
Yeah, it's most likely to get flagged if I were to play an audio excerpt. That's usually what gets flagged. Usually one voice alone isn't going to get us flagged on YouTube, but you never know. One thing that's cool, though, actually, is I don't know how their distribution is set up, but My Soul Among Lions releases their songs under the Creative Commons license, which is saying if you're doing it for non-commercial purposes, you can use the song freely. You don't have to ask any special permissions or pay any royalties.
Oh, nice.
So not just for use within the context of a church service, but if people are making non-commercial use of their songs, they're like, be blessed, go for it. That's really cool. So I appreciate that. Cool. And I have to say also, I'm pretty sure that whether it be an actual top 5 pick or a runner-up, I have mentioned My Soul Among Lions songs in one way or another every episode so far. So I'm kind of, at this point, I'm kind of getting predictable, I guess.
I think I have too, but I mean, there really is a reason for it. I mean, the settings that they've done are just really, really excellent. And what sticks out to me is amongst Psalms where there's the music is really strong. Like I thought for Psalm 12, though there weren't a ton of expositional entries, the ones that were there were all really good.
So I kind of felt like I got down to a top 10 or top 7 pretty easily. Then within that top 7, it was a harder pick of which ones I'm actually going to cut.
Yeah.
Speaking of runners-up, do you have any runners-up other than the ones we've already given shout-outs to?
Yeah. I won't mention any comments with them. I'll just drop the runners-up. So Psalm 12 by Theophilus is very, I will say this, it is very opposite of My Soul Among the Lions. It's more like a chant, but it's really good. And then Pure Words by Jamie Souls.
Yes. Who also gets a lot of shout-outs in the series very deservedly.
Yes.
And I only have one that we haven't already mentioned because we've already mentioned some of my one of my runners-up. Rise Up, Psalm 12 by a Common Psalter, I thought was also a strong setting. The next portion of our podcast is our retuning challenge, which are lyrics that we really like that could use a new melody. It's really simple. We name the song, quote a verse or two, let the words speak for themselves. And so I have 2, you have 1, so I'll kick us off. And then my first is Help Lord for Men of Virtue Fail by Isaac Watts. And I especially like his verses 3 and 4. Lord, when iniquities abound and blasphemy grows bold, when faith is rarely to be found and love is waxing cold, is not thy chariot hastening on? Hast thou not given the sign? May we not trust and live upon a promise so divine? Yes, saith the Lord, now I will rise and make the oppressors flee. I shall appear to their surprise and set my servants free. Thy word like silver's 7 times tried through ages shall endure. The men that in thy truth confide shall find thy promise sure.
That's good. The one that I had for the retuning challenge was Help Lord the Godly Man Decays by John Bernard.
Okay.
And I'll just quote verses 1, 2, and 7. Help, Lord, the godly man decays and quits the hated ground, and faithful men in these our days are very rarely found. For each one acts a treacherous part, deceives his friend with lies, with flattering lips and double heart they speak in close disguise. O Lord, thy promised help and grace thou strictly wilt observe, and ever from this faithless race them carefully preserve.
And then, as I hinted earlier, a song that is in my top 5 is also in my retuning challenge. And while I normally just give words and don't elaborate, that's odd enough that I'll explain. And my thought process here is, I like the melody, and it'll work in some contexts, but I also think that there are contexts where it probably wouldn't work so well. So I think that the right retuning, the right new melody, could bring this lyric forward for a new generation of Christians. And so just to give a sample, I'll quote the first verse or two, where Martin Luther said, O Lord, look down from heaven, behold, and let your pity waken. How few are we within your fold, your saints by all forsaken. True faith seems quenched on every hand, your word is not allowed to stand, dark times have us o'ertaken. Verse 2, O God, root out all heresy, and of false teachers rid us, who proudly say, now where is he who shall our speech forbid us? By right or might we shall prevail, what we determine cannot fail, we want no Lord and Master. And then, of course, he goes on to speak of God's response and the purity of his words in later verses. Well, Pastor Chad, thank you for taking the time to do this.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And you have a book. Let's give that a shout out before we conclude.
Yeah, Ecclesiastes, an answer key to life's big questions. The goal is really for it to be targeted towards unbelievers, something to help people hold on to unchanging truth in an age where it seems like the answers are falling apart. It's available on Amazon. And as I've said other times, if any listener wants a copy, just contact Daniel and I will send you a copy for free.
Thank you. And to the listener, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and subscribe to catch future episodes. You can also find past episodes in the free 76,000 entry Expository Songs searchable database at expositorysongs.com. Thank you for listening.